Let's see. So, to my local folks, to anyone local who's watching the show, and when I say that, I mean local to the Central Coast. Again, I'm an independent journalist based in Santa Maria, California. That's northern Santa Barbara County, which is just our neighboring county to the north is San Luis Obispo County. And there's an event tomorrow, if you're so inclined. That's tomorrow, May 22nd at 11:30 a.m. The DSA San Luis Obispo, so that's Democratic Socialists of America, San Luis Obispo. Full disclosure, I'm a dues-paying member of Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, and I am involved organizing with SLO DSA. So this is, I'm promoting a group that I'm a part of. I hope you don't mind. But they are doing a tenant rights and rent relief canvassing event tomorrow in San Luis Obispo. Why? Our county and cities are not doing enough to protect tenants and stop slumlords. We are informing tenants of their rights and empowering them to protect themselves. That's tomorrow, May 22nd, meeting at 11:30 a.m. at Mitchell Park in San Luis Obispo, 1400 Oso Street. If you want to follow DSA SLO, check out DSA_SLO. And so to talk about this, I reached out to Brandon Messerly, who is a organizer extraordinaire with DSA SLO. So let me get the video prepared here for y'all. It was very nice of Brandon to come on my show. He's a nice guy, and I don't know anybody who works as much as this guy to do stuff that does not pay him to try to make the world a better place. So let's check it out. This interview is about 20 minutes. I will be here with you in the chat for most of that. So enjoy, and I'll be back after the interview. Okay, today my guest on Political Pain is Brandon Messerly, SLO DSA organizer. Full disclosure, I'm also a member of DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, and I am involved with the SLO chapter, though they do cross-county stuff with Santa Barbara County, of course. But Brandon is a organizer extraordinaire. He's doing all kinds of stuff. He's got a meeting to get to after we record this, of course. But he's going to talk to us today about a tenant rights and rent relief kind of canvas, is this what you would call it? It's this Saturday, May 22nd, 2021 at 11:30 a.m. and canvassers are going to meet in Mitchell Park. That's 1400 Oso Street, San Luis Obispo, on the central coast of California, of course. So tell me, Brandon, have you been involved with organizing this kind of thing before? Is this a regular thing for SLO DSA? Admittedly, I'm a newer member, so.
So DSA SLO is a newer, smaller chapter in the grand scheme of Democratic Socialists of America.
Mm-hmm.
Being from a smaller town, we're obviously not the same as DSA LA or NYC or these groups that are getting like members elected to Congress. But
Of course.
housing justice work and tenant organizing work is something that a lot of DSA chapters are doing or have done and have done really well, to the extent of like organizing full-on tenant unions. And so this part, admittedly, before I was very involved with DSA SLO, but quite some time ago.
No worries about the cat. As many
Yeah.
cats as possible on my channel. But go
Yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
So quite some time ago, I think just like from people who have been in the community for a long time, and seeing what other DSA chapters have been doing, people identified this as something that is something that DSA SLO should be focusing on, because there's cool groups that do legal advocacy like the CRLA and stuff, but there's not really any groups like proactively organizing tenants in SLO County. And anyone who's a renter here knows how shitty it can be trying to find a rental that like a working class person can afford. And so without any other sort of like proactive solutions in place, and a kind of like bipartisan policy agreement from like the far right board of supervisors to our quote unquote progressive city council here in the city of SLO. Essentially, all of them can agree on prioritizing the needs and wants of the rich, primarily white homeowners in our county above tenants. And so quite some time ago, we started taking on the research of just starting the campaign by just letting people know what their rights are. And a lot of work by a lot of other people that were not me went into making a pretty cool flyer in English and Spanish of just something that you can have around at all times of just what are your basic rights as a tenant. But really we see that as the first step in a kind of broader organizing of tenants, because our local governments have made it pretty clear that if tenants want help, it's going to need to come from them, that they're not coming out to help them or offer them any assistance.
I see. So when you go out there and SLO DSA activists, and I should mention that SLO DSA is pairing with SLO County Progressives, right? Don't want to ignore that. So it's a coalitional effort. But what really, what is involved in this? What are you trying to get folks to know, or what are you trying to impart upon them? Or I don't know if you're asking them to get involved with, or anything. Are you trying to educate them? What exactly goes on in a tenant rights and rent relief canvas?
Yeah, so what we're doing right now, and I know the idea of canvassing, even for myself, is still pretty nerve-wracking. The idea of just like knocking on a stranger's door and trying to engage them in a conversation when there's often a million other things they'd rather do than talk to a stranger at their door. But for anyone who might be interested in helping out them, I think this is some of the easiest canvassing that you can do, because right now we're really not making any asks of anybody. This is really just about providing information to people. So right now our main goal is, I should have been more prepared and had our flyer like ready, but our main goal is just to get our tenants' rights informational flyer in the hands of every tenant in SLO County, ideally. And so we are hoping to be able to engage in some dialogue just about like what's your housing situation like? Do you know who your landlord is? Most people probably don't, we've found. Most people know who their tenant management company is, who kind of like facilitates taking your money and giving it to somebody else. But a lot of people don't know who actually owns their building, especially if they're in kind of a larger apartment complex and not in just like someone's granny unit or like a single family home or something like that. And so we're looking to start kind of just to landscape the housing situation in SLO County, and seeing if we notice any patterns as far as like management or owners of particularly bad places or places people have had bad experiences with. But those are kind of secondary right now to just helping people know what their rights are as a tenant, because like I said, our county and cities have made it pretty clear that you're not getting protection unless you seek it out yourself. And to seek out those protections, you need to know what your rights are. Because I mean, I think even we did kind of a soft launch on this just to make sure that things were prepared for people who have maybe not canvassed before. And even with our small group kind of soft launch, a couple of our members were looking over the flyer and being like, oh, my heating unit, it's broken. So I just kind of like put some tape over it and have just never used the heater, like not realizing that that's something that by law your landlord is required to fix if you make a complaint about it. So most people either just don't know what kind of protections they have, or are too scared of landlord retaliation if they do make a complaint that's like wrong. So our first step is just like the immediate fix of helping people know their rights and being able to stand up for themselves.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, when young people enter the labor force, and we have such a anemic labor rights, or labor movement in this country, that most people just don't know their rights, right? They just have no idea about, just so many different things. Overtime, we all have heard about Walmart locking the door at the end of the night so people can't leave until the work's done, and all this kind of crazy stuff. But like you said, that's a barrier for folks who rent. I mean, if you're in the income bracket where you don't own a house and you're working all the time, and we know how you mentioned how high rent is, it's work just to be informed on your rights, because we have, obviously there's federal law, but then California, you have state law, and then you have county law, and even if you're within a municipality like a city, it has certain agencies that you have to interface with and all of that. How does Are there any things that make SLO unique, that SLO DSA is aware of, or that you try to inform people about San Luis Obispo, whatever it might be?
Um, yeah, so I guess, I mean, if we're talking about the city of SLO, so there's clearly, at its basis, there's a power, um, there's like, your landlord has power over you, as they hold something that should ideally be a right to just have a roof over your head and survive, and they like completely control your access to it and how much of your paycheck goes to them. That's one thing. In the county of SLO, almost half of renters are rent burdened, which means that they pay 30% or more of their income towards rent every month. So, I
Wow.
mean, that means if you go and work a 9-hour shift, 3 of those you're essentially working for your landlord, who's not doing anything besides just happening to own the property that you need to live in to survive.
Hmm.
Um, and that's not necessarily unique in California, but it is a problem. And then with those power dynamics that the landlord holds over you, when you have an area like SLO County and the city of SLO, where enforcement is almost completely complaint based, meaning there's no one going in and like enforcing housing codes unless you as the tenant make a complaint about your living condition.
Hmm.
It can be really scary as a tenant if you don't know that anyone's has your back to make those complaints, because like most people just don't know what their landlord can evict them for or has to fix for them. And so a lot of people don't ask for help or don't seek help or don't complain about things, just because, like, whether we want to admit it or not, most renters are closer to being, at least in, like I can say in SLO, most renters are probably closer to being homeless than they are to owning a home in SLO. Like, I know for
Hmm.
me, like my bank account is much closer to having the zero that I can't afford to pay rent than I am to having what I would need for a down payment in San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
Um, and
Wow.
so just like the dynamics of that relationship are so skewed already. And then when it's completely complaint based, the landlord has even more power over you, because you, as someone who's going to school or working 2 jobs or taking care of a family, also have to educate yourself on what your rights are as a tenant before you can even go and seek those out. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, SLO County is super expensive, San Luis Obispo especially. Um, if you are a working class person, if you have a service job, I mean, you're spending a good majority of your time working just to line the pockets of your landlord. Um, and I mean, that's a bigger complaint than just tenants not knowing their rights. Like, that's a much bigger problem to deal with. But we hope that this is a first step in that, and helping tenants recognize that um, they are a class, and that we we don't get the things that we want: better housing, better living conditions, cheaper rent, unless we come together and ask for it. Um, because landlords might hold that power over us, but there's more tenants than there are landlords.
Of course. Is there any particular way that you've seen kind of housing play out in local politics, whether it's the city council or the mayorship or anything else?
Yeah, so I spoke of most housing code compliance being complaint based, essentially it's passive, in that no one's proactively coming out and seeing that. A few years ago, this was before I was too involved in local politics, but had just moved here. So I guess this would have been 2014-ish. The SLO City Council did try to enact a, I'm stumbling here, but essentially they had a more proactive code enforcement where city officials would check rental buildings for compliance on certain things, to see how they stood up. And I think during that time, the SLO Tribune had a story on this, I think end of last year, by Leslie Holden, who's done some great housing reporting. But I think it was only 16, or it was, I know it was only 16% of like 900 units that they checked passed on the first try, that they were completely up to code.
Huh.
And some of those were things that would be like, quote unquote, minor infractions, like not working fire or carbon monoxide alarms.
That doesn't seem minor to me.
Even that, like your day-to-day life, if you don't have a carbon monoxide alarm, like, yes, like it's not like you're in like one of those like slumlord areas, but I mean that's like a life or death thing. Like there's a reason that it's required to have a working fire alarm and carbon monoxide alarm.
Exactly.
And so if when they were doing proactive code enforcement, only 16% passed, I mean, you don't imagine that that number's gotten any better by, and so I guess I didn't go into this part of this. So that was a big contentious issue in the 2016 mayoral race, with both candidates running against it, but essentially one candidate, Jan Marks, was running against her own program that she enacted, and that was like a major reason for her losing by less than 100 votes to Heidi Harmon, who promised that although they did repeal that because the homeowners were mad and they were getting fined, and they were essentially, there were some tenants that didn't like it because they would just pass those fines down into the rents, or people were scared that their building was going to be like condemned and then they were just going to be out of it, and the city wasn't going to provide any resources if they like condemned the house. So I mean, it wasn't a great system to begin with, but the way that they set it up, but the idea of proactive code enforcement is good. But in 2016, those people that ran against it promised that there would be something else, that they just needed to tinker with the system, and now it's 2020 and there is nothing else. And that's something I guess I didn't mention, that housing in SLO, this isn't unique as far as landlords just being exploitative, but I think they know for some buildings that students just like need housing. Like if you're going to Cal Poly, like from out of SLO,
yeah,
at a point you just need somewhere to live. And so they can get away with charging really high rents for really shitty places, because like where else are these people going to go? Like eventually they have to live somewhere.
Exactly. Wow. So if folks are interested in getting involved, I'm recording this for my Friday show. So in the future, Saturday will be tomorrow, right? Anybody interested in getting involved on May 22nd, starts at 11:30 a.m. at Mitchell Park, 1400 Oso Street, San Luis Obispo. Do they need to attend any kind of education beforehand? Or is it pretty, would newcomers be paired up with somebody who's done this before? How does that look? Are you guys recommending everybody just come help out?
Yeah, so our goal is to make it as easy as possible for people to just show up. And so we will go over some just like general canvassing protocols, in particular, how to ensure that this is COVID safe. So if you do want to come out, we're going to ask that people wear masks and stuff, just for the safety of and comfort of people whose doors you're knocking on, who may want that. But we'll go over kind of canvassing basics day of. It's pretty easy. We'll give you a little half sheet with some just like pointers, not a full-on script that you have to follow, but kind of just like if you get lost in the conversation, where to look. But our goal is to make this as easy for anybody to show up as possible. It's not something you need to be an expert in. So we'll go out in groups as always for comfort, for safety, and I don't know. I like canvassing, and it's more fun if you're with at least a couple other people that you can kind of talk with in between conversations. Maybe you get a particularly like wacky person and you can kind of talk about it later. We're not sending up anyone by themselves.
Yeah.
And if you happen to not be able to make this particular meeting, if you want to be involved with like the planning and background stuff on this, our housing justice group meets on Zoom the first Monday of each month at 6 o'clock. So right now it looks like that would be June 7th. And our goal is we don't want to overburden ourselves. So this is not like the end all of the campaign. We're going to start off with monthly canvassing, primarily starting out in the city of SLO, just because that's where the bulk of our members are. Although, as you mentioned, and I'll shout out again, anyone in SLO County or Santa Maria who wants to join DSA, we are your local DSA chapter. But ideally, our goal would be to expand throughout the county as we bring in more people and train kind of like leaders to run these canvassing events. We would have to look at what it looks like, but we definitely want to expand throughout the county in Santa Maria, and whether that's just we make in a couple months past so, or if we get a group of like North County folks, maybe who can run their own, we could be going like every other week with different spots. But yeah, this won't be the last opportunity if you can't make it, but we would love as much people as there, because obviously we can cover more ground quicker that way. But this will be a continuing, ongoing project with lots of ways to get plugged in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would encourage people, I took the plunge and paid my dues. They're not that much, my yearly dues, and have just been showing up to meetings, and you kind of figure it out. And I believe somebody, it might have been you, of course, in a recent meeting said, when we learn to do political organizing, we're also learning to organize ourselves, right? And how to, we're all learning this stuff together. Some of us, such as Brandon, have a lot more experience with it, but it really is a people powered effort, and that's the cool thing to see about it. So, I think anybody who wants to get involved in something like this should just try it out. And you can show up to SLO DSA meetings and not pay, without paying, just to see what's going on, get a feel for it, dip your toe in there and see how it is. But I want to thank you, Brandon, for joining me today. Where can folks reach SLO DSA if they're interested?
Yeah, so I guess the easiest way as far as just keeping up to date on when things are happening are our social medias.
Mm-hmm.
So SLO Democratic Socialists, we have a page on Facebook. And then let me double check so I don't mess this up. I believe
Instagram.
Yeah, DSA_SLO
Yep.
on Instagram and Twitter. We also have a website that's kind of under construction, so it hasn't been updated for a while, but you can see our tenant rights flyer in Spanish and in English on the website. That's one of the few things that's actually on there. But more important is you can sign up for our newsletter so that you can get updates on events. You'll be sent out the Zoom links for any meetings that are open to everyone, which is most things, and being held on Zoom right now for the time being. So for maybe people who have other passions, we have a kind of petered out, but their abolitionist/defunding working group that was able to earlier this year get SLO City to at least pause on building a $50 million police station, and hopefully not doing, but we'll see where that goes. We have an electoral politics committee preparing for 2022 elections, where hopefully we can get people into office who don't just say they're progressives, but then never enact any renter protections, but will actually fight for working people. We've got a monthly socialist saloons if you just want to hang out and socialize, because
those are fun.
Part that's been missing from a lot of Zoom meetings is you don't have the like before and afterwards to just hang out with fellow organizers. And And we're a completely membership driven organization, so everything's democratic. So if we don't have something that you think that we should be working on, um, just show up and do it, and people will help out.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, very cool. Thanks again, Brandon Messerly, organizer with the SLO DSA, that's San Luis Obispo. I don't know what you call it. Is it technically a chapter or not? I can't remember.
Almost.
Almost.
We're an organizing committee right now.
Yeah, it needs members. It needs members. So that's part of it. But thanks again for being on the show today. And hopefully a few people will see this and see you tomorrow, May 22nd, starting at a meeting at 11:30 a.m. in Mitchell Park, 1400 Oso Street, San Luis Obispo. So thanks again. And the cats are always welcome, Brandon. I hope you know, on Political Pain.
Okay, thanks.
You bet. All right, thanks to Brandon for being on the show and his cat. I loved how I love when things like that happen, when a cat is constantly pushing its way into a shot, into a Zoom call. I love it. Got a great comment here from Bo. Hey, Bo, old friend of mine. I'm not saying he's old. We're all old together. But he says, quote, rent's, in the comment, rent's totally a burden here. He lives in San Luis Obispo, I believe. It wasn't always like that, though. I remember when a one-bedroom apartment in Pismo was $600 a month. Now I sound like a crazy old guy when I tell the kids that today. Yeah, man, I hear you. And I live in Santa Maria, and Santa Maria is supposed to be like the more affordable bedroom community here on the Central Coast, and it's nuts here. It's the rent's too damn high, as that one guy said. So if y'all want to get involved, go check it out. SLO_DSA. Bo, we'd love to see you there, man, if you want to show up and join the democratic process and join a bunch of socialists. A lot of the folks involved there are already kind of members of unions, so they kind of have experience with that. Needs more people. Guys, if you ever want to, I'm new to DSA. I've only been showing up to meetings in a couple months, and it's weird, and you don't really know what to do at first. But it's a thing you can do to get politically involved and, not just get involved with just party politics. They do a lot of different things, such as this canvassing that's going on tomorrow, Saturday. So get involved with that if you want to. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Really appreciate everybody who watches this show.